You want them cuffed or straight? That's what the tailor asked me when I stood before him standing in front of the mirror with a new suit on. It wasn't a police officer asking me to cuff my hands and take me off. When I go to buy a suit, I typically like to have my pants cuffed. Here, and most any suit I have, the pants will be cuffed. They are given over to the tailor, and in a week's time or so, I get the suit back. There may be some adjustments made to the coat, sleeve length, and that sort of thing. I pick it up, try it on, and I'm very happy with what generally I'm very happy with what I've got. But when I come home, or when I come to church and put my hand into the pocket, I may find that within the pocket there's a little bit of fabric left over from the pant cuffs, from the pants. The tailor would cut the end off of the pant that was a little bit too long before he cuffed it, and had that remainder stick it in my pocket. Now, is that a souvenir? No. He doesn't sign the little bit of remnant left. Rather, it's something left over so that if I need to patch up a hole or something like that, I've got a little bit of material to do that. And typically with a coat, you'll also have a couple extra buttons as well to cover in case a button falls off. Those strips of fabric are just an inch or two wide, and they go around in a circle like a pant leg, and that's all there is to it. There's no real use for that fabric in any other way. Perhaps you could use it as a headband, but there's not much use for it. It's a remnant, typically to be thrown away. Isaiah makes use of the image of a remnant to talk about the nation of Israel. And it's not a very flattering image. I mean, all the attention goes to the suit. The top, the pants, and so forth. Pleated pants, the cuff, all the rest of it. That's what gets the attention. But the remnant is tucked away. It's not seen. Isaiah talks about the nation of Israel, the people of God, as the remnant. Just what is left over. That which is hidden away, tucked away for another time. And what he says to Israel at this time is that when the Assyrian incursion comes through their land, all that will be left of Israel is just that remnant. Now, what can you do with that remnant? You can't build another suit out of that remnant, can you? The image actually is not of a suit that Isaiah is thinking of here, but more of a forest that is decimated by, if you will, strip mining, by, here in this case, an army going to war not only with the people, but also with the land of Israel, knocking down trees and destroying the fruitfulness of the land, so that nothing but stumps, and burned stumps at that, are left behind. This is the image that God has in mind for His people. This is all that's going to be left when the Assyrian comes through the land. Now, if you are on the receiving end of this prophecy, you are wondering, where is the comfort in this? Where is the encouragement? What hope do I have in listening to all this? Well, there is a measure of hope or comfort for the people of God in this text, which may on the surface be hard to find. After all, you don't see that remnant in the pocket of a suit coat when you see someone dressed before you. It's not immediately visible. But God has a purpose in mind. The sufferings that are going to come over His people are purposeful. There is an intent, and the intent is gracious. Yes, there will be judgment. Yes, there is wrath. There will be judgment on the people of God. Severe. because of the sins of the people of God. But God does not want us to lose sight of the grace that will also be manifested in these days of judgment. The grace which says that the Assyrian who comes through the land from the north and then comes all the way up to Jerusalem, which in the previous section Isaiah described as like waters coming up to the neck. Though the Assyrian comes this far, he will not bring a complete destruction of the people. God, in His sovereignty, will say, thus far and no further. And we need to hear that today. When we see God's judgments come over us in our personal lives, when we see that in our churches, in our nation, the community at large, when we see God's judgments at hand, and they seem to come right up to the neck, we need to be reminded that God has a gracious purpose in all of this, and that by His sovereignty, He will preserve His purposes for us. He will not allow us to be overwhelmed completely by these troubles. That's the point we want to catch hold of this morning. God's grace in the midst of His judgments. The judgments would be, of course, severe. God describes through the prophet Isaiah the nature of these judgments. We've already seen much of this taking place in the latter part of the 9th chapter, as God in His wrath brings the Assyrians across the Israelis to the north. And then in the 10th chapter, God says that His judgment will also eventually come back on the Assyrians, and He'll bring judgment on them. But now it's focused more on Judah to the south, and Jerusalem in particular. And the Assyrian is going to come through the land and wreak havoc as he makes his way along on this journey. If you look at the latter part of this chapter, the 10th chapter, we have a description of the approach of the Assyrian through the land. In verses 28 and following, there is this record of the entrance of these armies. And the fear, the terror that spreads throughout the various communities as this overwhelming force approaches. You remember back in the Gulf War when the senior President Bush amassed an alliance to go after Iraq. And Colonel, I believe, General Colin Powell mentioned the philosophy of going to war. And a philosophy of overwhelming force. That's what they wanted to have when they went into Iraq. Overwhelming force. Such a terror that strikes fear in the heart of the opponent, so that they will just simply lay down their arms and give up. And you recall watching the television screen and seeing, as these reporters are embedded with the military, seeing video of the Iraqis coming up out of their foxholes, waving to surrender before the fight even began. Abandoning their tanks and so forth because of this overwhelming force. As the American Air Force came overhead and target bombed the nation, and then the ground force came sweeping through the land, the Iraqis just began giving up left and right. There was this final scene, you recall, where the Iraqi military was in full flight out of the south, headed back towards Baghdad. And the American military jets were flying over and just picking them off left and right. This is the idea behind what's taking place here in Israel. As the Assyrian comes through, the very small communities that see them are shivering with fear. Some are running, abandoning their homes. In one community, Madmena, I believe is the name of it, just picks up the whole community. The whole community